The clinking of silverware against fine china echoed through Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. This gilded cage was the city's lullaby for the ultra-rich. For billionaire Arthur Vance, it was just another Tuesday. He was a predator in a $1,000 suit, a man who devoured companies whole. But tonight, the hunter was about to become the hunted. In 60 seconds, the lullaby would shatter into a symphony of screams. 5 men, armed and silent, would turn the restaurant into a prison. The police were minutes away. His private security was a lie. His life was worth less than the wine he was drinking. The only thing standing between him and a brutal end wasn't a hero or a cop, but a waitress named Kate. A woman paid to be invisible who was about to prove she was anything but. The air inside the gilded cage was thick with the scent of money and truffle oil. It was a meticulously curated atmosphere designed to make the patrons feel as though the chaotic streets of Tribeca were a world away. A gritty rumor they might read about but never experience firsthand. Catherine Novak, or Kate as she preferred, moved through this rarefied air like a ghost. Her uniform was a crisp black ensemble, her movements economical and precise. To the diners, she was a functional part of the decor. A polite automaton who refilled water glasses and described the pan-seared scallops with practiced enthusiasm. They didn't see the way her eyes never truly settled, how they constantly scanned the room in a subconscious sweeping pattern, left to right, front to back. They didn't notice how she mentally mapped the exits, the choke points, the sight lines from every table. They didn't understand that her quiet demeanor wasn't shyness, but a cultivated state of low-level vigilance, a phantom limb from a life she had tried to amputate. 6 years in a different uniform, in places where the air smelled of sand and cordite, had hardwired her nervous system for threat assessment. Now, the greatest threat was usually a dropped fork or a complaint about a corked bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape. Tonight's main event was Table 7, the restaurant's most coveted corner booth. It was occupied by Arthur Vance. Vance wasn't merely rich, he was a force of nature, a corporate raider whose picture often graced the cover of Forbes, with headlines that used words like disruptor, visionary, or, in more critical publications, vulture. He had a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite and eyes the color of a winter sky, cold and assessing. He treated the restaurant staff with a perfunctory, dismissive courtesy that was somehow more insulting than outright rudeness. He wasn't there to enjoy the food. He was there to conduct a power play over a $500 steak. Across from him sat Gerard Peterson, a senior partner at a white shoe law firm, a man whose soft physique and nervous energy contrasted sharply with Vance's predatory stillness. They were discussing the final hostile takeover of Ethelred Industries, a legacy manufacturing firm. The board is set to capitulate, Peterson said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. The final holdouts are folding. By Friday, Ethelred is yours, Arthur. Vance didn't smile. He simply nodded, taking a slow sip of his bourbon. Holdouts don't fold, Gerard. They're broken. Ensure their severance packages are minimal. An example must be made. Kate approached the table to clear their appetizer plates, her presence barely registering. Will you be needing anything else, Mr. Vance? She asked, her voice calm and even. He waved a dismissive hand without looking at her. Just the check and have my car brought around. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom. Tell Frank I want to be moving in 10 minutes. Frank Miller was Vance's head of security, a hulking man who was currently sitting at the bar, nursing a club soda and trying to look inconspicuous, a task for which he was physically ill-suited. As Kate walked away, her gaze drifted past the restaurant's grand floor-to-ceiling windows. For a fraction of a second, her professional calm faltered. A black utility van, a Ford Transit with no side windows, was parked directly across the street. It wasn't in a legal spot. It was double-parked, its engine likely running. Delivery vans were common but not at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, and not this model. It looked more like a tactical vehicle than a florist's transport. Her eyes narrowed. A flicker of movement from the alleyway beside the restaurant caught her attention. A man in a dark hoodie, ostensibly talking on his phone, but his head was angled towards the restaurant entrance, his posture too rigid for a casual conversation. Her heart rate ticked up a single, controlled beat. Coincidence, she told herself. This is New York. There's always chaos. She had been seeing ghosts for years. Every idling car was a threat, every loiterer a potential trigger man. It was a symptom of her past, a hypervigilance she was trying to medicate with the mundane rhythm of service. She delivered the check to table 7, her movements still fluid, betraying none of the sudden tension coiling in her gut. Vance was signing the exorbitant bill, his Mont Blanc pen scratching against the paper. "Sir?" she said, her voice a little lower than before. "Your security, Mr. Miller, he's no longer at the bar." Vance didn't look up. "He's probably gone to check on the car. Frank is competent." Kate's eyes darted to the bar. Miller's glass was still there, half full. A professional doesn't leave his post without notifying his principal. Not even for a moment. Her blood ran cold. The man in the alley was gone. The van was still there. Something was fundamentally wrong. The carefully constructed symphony of the gilded cage was about to hit a jarring, violent crescendo. She turned back towards the kitchen, her pace quickening. She needed to get to a landline to make a call that wouldn't be traced on the restaurant's public Wi-Fi. Her hand was almost on the kitchen door when the world dissolved into noise and terror. The plate glass window at the front of the restaurant didn't just break. It imploded. A deafening crash of synthesized noise, a high-frequency acoustic blast from a device planted outside, shattered the glass and sent a wave of disorienting sound through the dining room. Patrons screamed, ducking under tables, their ears ringing before the last shard of glass had skittered across the marble floor. 5 figures moved through the empty frame. They were clad in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by dark balaclavas. They moved with a chilling, fluid efficiency that spoke of extensive training. One held a heavy-duty signal jammer, and in an instant, every cell phone in the room went dead. Another 2 fanned out, brandishing suppressed pistols, their movements calm and deliberate as they controlled the terrified crowd. "Nobody move," one of them barked, his voice a low, gravelly command. "Stay on the floor. Hands where I can see them." The remaining 2 men, their focus absolute, ignored the panicking diners. Their eyes were locked on one target. Their destination was table 7. Kate flattened herself against the wall near the kitchen entrance, her mind a whirlwind of activity. This wasn't a robbery. Robbers are loud, messy, and interested in wallets and jewelry. These men were silent, precise, and interested in a person. This was a snatch and grab, a professional extraction. One of the men reached Vance, grabbing him by the arm and hauling him from the booth. Peterson shrieked and cowered under the table. Vance, for the first time in what was likely decades, looked utterly shocked, his mask of invincible power stripped away. The leader of the group, a tall man with an air of cold authority, leaned close to Vance's ear. "Arthur Vance," he said, his voice a low hiss that cut through the whimpers of the hostages. "The ghosts of Ethelred send their regards. You have an overdue debt to pay." In that moment, Kate Novak understood the ghosts of her past and the ghosts of his had just converged in a storm of violence within the gilded cage. And the waitress, the invisible woman paid to take orders, was about to start giving them. Chaos is a symphony of fear. For the patrons of the gilded cage, it was a cacophony of shrieks, gasps, and the frantic scrabbling of expensive shoes on a floor littered with glass. For Kate, the noise faded into a focused hum. Her brain, jolted by the familiar surge of adrenaline, filtered the panic and processed only data. 5 hostiles, all male, judging by their build. Black tactical gear, non-reflective body armor. Likely main armaments appeared to be suppressed 9mm sidearms, probably Glock 19s or SIG P226S, efficient for close quarters work. 1 signal jammer currently active. No long guns visible, meaning they planned for speed and discretion, not a prolonged siege. Their entry was professional. Acoustic charge for shock and awe, followed by immediate control of the environment. Their formation was a classic diamond, with 1 point man, 2 on flank security, and 1 rearguard who was now securing the main entrance. The leader, the tall one who had spoken to Vance, was designated target leader. Her mind catalogued it all in less than 2 seconds. They were dragging Vance towards the shattered window, their movements practiced and synchronized. The flankers kept the patrons pinned down with menacing gestures, their suppressed weapons making no noise but projecting an aura of lethal intent. A woman near the front began to sob hysterically, her cries piercing the tense silence. One of the men, let's call him Flanker One, turned towards her. "Shut her up," he snarled at his partner. Kate saw her opening. It was small, a microsecond of diverted attention, but it was enough. While all eyes were on the hysterical woman and the abduction of Arthur Vance, nobody was watching the waitress who had melted into the shadows by the kitchen door. Her first priority wasn't Vance. It was the civilians. And the most immediate threat was escalation. Panic could get people killed. She needed to disrupt their plan, to sow a seed of chaos they didn't control. Her eyes scanned the immediate area. A heavy silver serving tray sat on a nearby service stand. Beside it, a bottle of San Pellegrino. It wasn't a gun, but it would do. She slid along the wall, her soft-soled shoes making no sound. Flanker 2 was the closest, his back partially turned as he surveyed the cowering diners on the far side of the room. He was about 15 feet away, too far for a direct physical confrontation. But his position was tactically weak. He had allowed a blind spot to his rear, assuming the threat was contained in front of him, a rookie mistake or maybe just arrogance. Kate moved. It wasn't a run but a swift, gliding motion that was terrifyingly silent. She grabbed the serving tray, its weight familiar and solid in her hand. In one fluid movement, she swung it like a discus. It sailed through the air, a silver blur, and struck Flanker 2 on the side of his head, just behind the ear. The heavy silver edge connected with his temporal bone with a sickening thud. The man grunted, his knees buckling as he staggered, his weapon pointing towards the ceiling for a disoriented moment. He didn't go down, but he was stunned. The attack was so unexpected, so completely outside the parameters of their operation, that it momentarily broke their coordinated rhythm. The target leader, who was halfway to the window with Vance, turned his head, his eyes under the balaclava widening in surprise. What the hell? That was the diversion. In that instant of confusion, Kate launched herself forward. She didn't go for the stunned man. She went for the one closest to the patrons, Flanker 1, who was now turning to see what had happened. She closed the distance in 3 long strides, grabbing the neck of the Pellegrino bottle. As she reached him, she smashed it against the edge of a marble-top table, the glass shattering with a sharp crack, leaving her holding the jagged neck. Flanker 1 barely had time to register her presence before she was on him. She didn't stab him. That was messy and unpredictable. Instead, she drove the jagged glass into the soft tissue of his weapon hand, right into the muscle and tendons of his forearm. He roared in pain, an involuntary spasm causing his fingers to release his pistol. The weapon clattered to the floor. Before he could react, Kate drove her knee hard into his groin, then followed with a brutal palm heel strike to his nose. There was a wet crunch. He reeled backward, clutching his face, blood pouring through his fingers, completely neutralized as a threat. 2 down. It had taken less than 5 seconds. The room, which had been filled with whimpers, fell into a shocked silence. The patrons and the remaining attackers stared at the waitress, this unassuming figure of quiet efficiency, who had just dismantled 2 trained operatives with a serving tray and a water bottle. The target leader finally reacted. "Forget the protocol. Get him out now," he yelled to the man holding Vance. He raised his own weapon and fired 2 rounds in Kate's direction. The suppressed shots were quiet poofs, but they were no less deadly. Kate was already moving, diving behind an overturned mahogany table, the rounds thudding into the wood where her head had been moments before. "Shoot her!" The leader screamed at the stunned Flanker 2, who was shaking his head, trying to clear the ringing in his ears. Vance, meanwhile, was struggling. Spurred by Kate's impossible intervention, his survival instincts finally overrode his shock. He stomped down hard on the instep of the man holding him, then drove an elbow back into his captor's ribs. The man grunted, his grip loosening for a critical second. It was all Vance could do, a desperate, clumsy act, but it bought another moment. From behind the table, Kate's mind was racing. 3 hostiles remained. The leader, the rearguard at the door, and the stunned one, now raising his weapon. She was unarmed and outgunned. Staying put was a death sentence. She needed a new environment, a place with more cover, more choke points, more potential weapons. The kitchen. "Vance!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the air with an authority that stunned him into obedience. "To me now." The leader fired again, splintering more of the table. Kate peered around the edge. The rearguard at the door was moving forward, trying to get a clear line of sight on her. The stunned one was still unsteady. The leader was torn between dealing with her and securing his primary target. Their cohesion was broken. They were reacting to her, not executing their plan. She now controlled the tempo of the engagement. She kicked over a heavy candelabra, sending it crashing to the floor in their path, creating another minor obstacle. "Vance, move!" Arthur Vance, the billionaire titan who commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors, scrambled on his hands and knees towards the waitress, his bespoke suit tearing on the broken glass. For the first time in his life, he was not the one in charge. He was following the orders of a woman whose name he hadn't even bothered to learn, a woman who was now the only thing keeping him alive. The heavy swinging doors of the kitchen slammed shut behind them, plunging them into a world of stainless steel, hissing steam, and the lingering aroma of garlic and fear. The kitchen staff, a mix of chefs and dishwashers, were huddled in a corner, their white uniforms a stark contrast to the terror on their faces. "Stay down. Stay quiet," Kate commanded, her voice low and steady, not for Vance but for the terrified staff. Her eyes were already moving, dissecting this new battlefield. It was a labyrinth of steel counters, walk-in freezers, and open flames from the gas ranges. It was loud, cluttered, and dangerous. "Perfect." Vance leaned against a counter, breathing heavily, his face pale with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Who? What are you?" he stammered, looking at her as if for the first time. The woman he'd dismissed as furniture had just waged a small, brutal war in his name. Kate ignored him. Her mind wasn't in the kitchen of the Gilded Cage. For a gut-wrenching moment, it was 6 years ago in a dusty, sun-baked alley in Beirut. The smell of cooking spices was suddenly mixed with the phantom scent of diesel fumes and cordite. She saw the face of the man she had been assigned to protect, a British diplomat named Alistair Finch. She saw the black sedan that came out of nowhere, the synchronized attack, the explosive charge that breached their armored vehicle. She remembered the failure, the cold, sick feeling of watching her principal being dragged away as she lay pinned down, wounded and helpless. They told her it wasn't her fault, that the intelligence was bad, the opposition too prepared. But in the quiet, dark hours of the night, failure was a cold companion. She had left the service, trading the Queen's shilling for minimum wage and tips, seeking anonymity, a quiet penance. No, she thought, shaking the memory away with a force of will that was almost physical. Not again. Not this time. This time she wasn't pinned down. This time she was in control. "They said something about Ethelred," she said sharply, her back to Vance as she peered through the small circular window of the kitchen door. "What is it?" "Ethelred Industries," Vance panted, straightening his tie out of pure ingrained habit. My fund is acquiring it. A hostile takeover." "Who did you ruin to get it?" Kate asked, her tone devoid of judgment. It was a simple tactical question. Vance's jaw tightened. "That's business. There are always casualties." "What was the name of the casualty-in-chief?" she pressed. "The CEO. The founder, Walter Thorne," Vance admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The company had been in his family for 3 generations. He couldn't adapt. He leveraged everything against our bid. When it became clear he would lose, he took his own life. Last month." "Thorne." The name resonated with the attacker's words. "The ghosts of Ethelred send their regards." This wasn't a corporate kidnapping for ransom. This was vengeance. Personal, intimate, and infinitely more dangerous. These men weren't here to negotiate. They were here to collect a debt Vance couldn't pay with money. A loud bang on the kitchen door made Vance jump. They were coming. Kate moved with renewed urgency. We need to get out. There's a service exit in the back, leads to the alley. She scanned the kitchen again, her eyes landing on a heavy cast-iron skillet and a butcher's block bristling with knives. She grabbed a 10-inch chef's knife, its weight comfortable and familiar in her hand. It felt more natural than the notepad she usually carried. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, turning to face Vance. Her eyes were chips of ice. The timid waitress was gone, replaced by someone he couldn't have imagined in his worst nightmares. "From now on, you do exactly what I say when I say it. You don't ask questions. You don't hesitate. Your life depends on your ability to follow a simple order. Understood?" Vance, a man who hadn't taken an order from anyone since he was a teenager, found himself nodding numbly. Understood. The kitchen door burst open. The rearguard, the one from the entrance, stepped through cautiously, pistol first. Kate was ready. She had positioned herself behind a tall rolling rack of sheet pans. As the attacker entered, she kicked the base of the rack. It rolled forward, a clattering metallic avalanche, right into the man's path. He was forced to jump back, momentarily off balance. Kate exploded from her cover. She didn't go for his gun. She went for his joints. She slammed the handle of the chef's knife into his wrist, a targeted strike designed to numb the nerves. His gun clattered away. Before he could recover, she drove the point of her elbow into his solar plexus, forcing the air from his lungs in a choked gasp. As he doubled over, she brought her knee up under his chin with a brutal snapping motion. His head snapped back, and he collapsed, unconscious, before he hit the greasy floor. 3 down, 2 to go. But the leader was still out there, and he had the primary target's full history. He was the most dangerous. From the dining room, the leader's voice boomed, amplified by the sudden quiet. "Silas Thorne. That was my father's name, Vance. Does it ring any bells? He built that company with his bare hands. You took it all with the push of a button and a smile on your face." So the leader was Silas Thorne, Walter's son. This was his personal vendetta. "You can't hide in there forever, Vance," Silas shouted. "And you, the waitress, whoever you are, you're dead. You're just delaying the inevitable." Kate grabbed Vance's arm, her grip like steel. "He's right about one thing. We can't stay here." She pulled him towards the back of the kitchen. "The alley is our only way out." But as they reached the heavy steel service door, they heard a metallic click from the other side. It was being locked from the outside. A cold voice drifted through the thick metal. It was the last man, the one who had been escorting Vance. "Silas, they're covered. They're trapped. They were boxed in." The kitchen had become their tomb. Vance looked at Kate, his face ashen. The cool confidence she had projected began to show the faintest of cracks. The ghosts of Beirut were whispering in her ear again, taunting her with the claustrophobic dread of a plan falling apart, of a trap closing shut. Trapped. The word hung in the air, heavier than the grease and steam. The kitchen, which moments before had felt like a tactical advantage, now felt like a cage. From the dining room, Silas Thorne was controlling the board. From the alley, his last man held the only exit. Vance's composure finally shattered. "We're dead," he breathed, sliding down the wall to sit on the grimy floor. "This is it. My God. Frank. Where is Frank?" Kate's mind was working, discarding and forming plans at a rapid pace. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Your man Frank is either dead or he's compromised," she stated bluntly. "Given that these men knew your exact location and schedule, my money is uncompromised." The idea hit Vance like a physical blow. Frank Miller had been with him for over a decade. He was more than an employee. He was a constant, a rock of dependability. The betrayal seemed more inconceivable than the attack itself. "No," Vance whispered. "Not Frank. He wouldn't. Everyone has a price, Mr. Vance," Kate said, her voice sharp, pulling him out of his denial. "Or a reason. Silas Thorne clearly has a reason. What's Frank's?" Before Vance could answer, Silas's voice echoed from the dining room again, laced with a triumphant cruelty. "I know you can hear me, Arthur. You might be wondering how we got past your security. You shouldn't have passed Frank Miller over for that promotion last month. For that promotion last year. Loyalty is a tricky thing, especially when it's underpaid. The confirmation felt like a punch to the gut. Vance looked up at Kate, his eyes wide with the genuine ache of betrayal. Everything he had built his life on, control, power, loyalty, bought and paid for, was a lie. He was completely alone. Except for her. He looked at this woman, this complete non sequitur, this enigma in the space of 10 minutes. She had shown more loyalty, more courage than a man he'd paid a six-figure salary for a decade. Why? He asked, his voice strained. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Kate finished checking the tension of a meat cleaver she'd pulled from a magnetic strip on the wall. She tested its weight, its balance. 6 years ago, I was in Beirut, she said, not looking at him. I was part of a close protection detail for a diplomat. We were ambushed. They were professionals just like this crew. They knew our route, our response time. They had inside help. My principal was taken. I was the only one left. She paused, the memory etching lines on her face. I don't like losing. Not twice. An unspoken understanding passed between them. They were from different worlds, a billionaire and a waitress. But in that moment, they were bound by the shared experience of being hunted. A fragile, desperate alliance was forged in the crucible of the kitchen. Okay, Vance, he said, pushing himself to his feet. His suit was ruined. His hands were shaking, but a flicker of his old resolve had returned. Okay, what do we do? They expect us to stay here, to wait for the end, or to try the back door again. We're going to do neither. Kate's eyes scanned the ceiling. She pointed with the cleaver. The ventilation system. High on the wall was a large, industrial-grade ventilation hood over the main grill with a wide duct leading up and through the wall. It was greasy, dark, and impossibly tight. You can't be serious, Vance balked. It's our only way out that they won't be watching. It should lead up to the roof, Kate reasoned. From there, we have options. Fire escape, adjoining buildings. Anything is better than a kill box. She dragged a heavy prep table under the vent. You'll have to give me a boost. It's too high to reach. Vance stared at the grimy, dark opening. The thought of crawling through that filth was repulsive, but the thought of Silas Thorne was worse. He nodded. All right. Kate put the handle of the chef's knife between her teeth and tucked the meat cleaver into the back of her waistband. When I'm up, I'll pull you through. Be ready to move fast. Vance cupped his hands, and Kate stepped into them. With a grunt, he heaved her upward. She was surprisingly light but dense with muscle. She grabbed the edge of the vent, her fingers finding purchase on the greasy lip of the metal. She pulled herself up, swinging her legs into the dark, cavernous duct. A shower of dust and grime fell onto Vance's head. It's a tight fit. Her voice echoed metallically from within. But it goes up. I see a maintenance ladder about 10 feet in. She extended a hand down to him. Your turn. Vance reached up, and Kate's grip locked onto his forearm. It was like being grabbed by a vice. She pulled, and with a great deal of scraping and cursing, Arthur Vance, the master of the universe, crawled into the guts of his favorite restaurant. The duct was suffocatingly narrow, the air thick with the smell of old grease. It was a humiliating, terrifying crawl into darkness. Below them, they heard a crash as Silas and his remaining man finally breached the kitchen. They're gone. Silas's voice was faint, enraged. The vent. Check the roof. Go. Go. The race was on. Kate and Vance scrambled up the maintenance ladder inside the shaft, their movements clumsy and loud in the echoing metal tube. They were exposed, making a racket that was a perfect beacon for their hunters. Above them, a faint square of lesser darkness promised an exit. Below them, they could hear the sounds of pursuit. Their unlikely alliance was about to face its ultimate test on the rain-slicked rooftops of New York City. The plan to use the kitchen as a choke point was dead. The gambit had failed, but Kate Novak was trained to adapt, to turn a failed plan into a new opportunity. The kitchen was no longer a fortress. It was a trap they had just narrowly escaped. Now, the entire building was the battlefield, and they had just traded a horizontal fight for a vertical one. Crawling through the ventilation shaft was a claustrophobic nightmare. It was a tight squeeze for Kate, and even more so for the broader-shouldered Vance. It was agonizing. The sharp edges of the sheet metal tore at his expensive suit and scraped his skin. Every movement echoed, a deafening announcement of their position. "Check the roof," Vance gasped, his voice tight with panic. "They'll be waiting for us. They have to find the roof access first." Kate's voice echoed back, calm and controlled. "We have a head start. Keep moving." They reached the top of the shaft, which ended at a large exhaust fan. A rickety service panel was set into the side of the duct just before the blades. Kate put her shoulder into it. It groaned in protest, rusted shut. She braced herself and kicked. The panel flew open with a screech of tortured metal, and they spilled out onto the gravel-strewn rooftop into the cold night air. Rain had begun to fall, a fine, misty drizzle that slicked every surface and muffled the sounds of the city below. The rooftop was a maze of HVAC units, pipes, and skylights. They were on a 5-story building surrounded by taller skyscrapers that loomed like silent, indifferent gods. Almost immediately, a heavy metal door on the far side of the roof burst open. It was the roof access stairwell. Silas Thorne emerged, his pistol raised. He spotted them instantly. "There!" he screamed. A shot rang out, not the suppressed thud from before, but a deafeningly loud crack that echoed between the buildings. He'd removed the suppressor. He was done with subtlety. Kate shoved Vance behind a large air conditioning unit. The bullet whizzed past, striking a metal chimney with a loud ping. "He's alone," Kate observed, peering around the edge of their cover. "He must have sent his last man to cover the front or the alley. Alone is all he needs to be." Vance hissed, his back pressed against the humming metal. "He's overconfident," Kate said, her mind working. "He thinks he has us cornered. We'll use that." She looked around, her eyes darting across their new environment. Her gaze settled on a thick bundle of electrical conduits running along the edge of the roof, connected to a massive junction box. Beside it lay a discarded length of steel pipe, probably left by a maintenance worker. An idea, desperate and dangerous, began to form. "I need a diversion," she said, turning to Vance. "A big one. Something to draw his fire and make him move from that doorway." Vance looked at her, his face a mask of fear. "What am I supposed to do?" "Exactly what you do best," Kate replied, a grim smile touching her lips. "Be an arrogant billionaire. Draw his attention. Taunt him. You wanted to know about Walter Thorne? Ask his son what really happened. Keep him talking. Keep him angry. I need 30 seconds. Vance stared at her, horrified. "He'll shoot me. He won't kill you from that distance. He wants to do this up close. I can see it in his posture. This is personal for him. Now do it." Before he could protest further, Kate grabbed the steel pipe and slipped away, disappearing into the shadows and steam rising from the rooftop vents. Vance was alone. He took a deep breath, the cold, wet air stinging his lungs. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears. He thought of what she said. Be an arrogant billionaire. He knew how to do that. He stepped out from behind the HVAC unit, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Thorne!" he yelled, his voice surprisingly steady. "Silas Thorne, is that you? You look just like your father. The same wild look in your eyes before he lost everything." Silas froze, his aim steadying on Vance's chest. "Don't you dare speak his name, you parasite." "I'm just stating a fact," Vance continued, taking a slow step forward. "He was weak. He couldn't compete. So he blamed the world. He blamed me. But it was his own failure that destroyed him. Are you going to be a failure, too?" Rage contorted Silas's face. "He built a legacy. You destroy them. You're a plague." He took a step out from the doorway, moving onto the open roof to get a clearer shot. "I'm here to collect a debt he was too broken to demand." "A debt?" Vance laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Your father owed his creditors millions. He left you nothing but his weakness. And you think you can succeed where he failed by cornering me on a roof with a gun? It was working. Silas was moving, stalking toward Vance, his focus entirely on Vance. His tactical awareness blinded by pure hatred. He was halfway across the roof now. Meanwhile, Kate moved like a phantom. She circled around behind a series of large vents, the steel pipe held tight in her hands. She reached the electrical conduits unnoticed. Using the pipe for leverage, she pried open the heavy cover of the main junction box. Inside was a Medusa's head of thick, high-voltage cables. The rain sizzled where it touched the exposed connections. She could hear Vance still talking, his voice rising, baiting Silas closer. She had to time this perfectly. She jammed the steel pipe into the junction box, ramming it against the main bus bars. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. A massive shower of blue and white sparks erupted from the box with a sound like a lightning strike. The entire roof was plunged into darkness as every light, every humming HVAC unit shorted out. For half a second, the rooftop was illuminated by a blinding actinic flash. In that flash, Silas was momentarily blinded. In that darkness, Kate moved. She sprinted across the gravel, silent and fast. Silas, disoriented, spun around, firing a wild shot into the blackness. He didn't see her coming until it was too late. She didn't attack his gun hand. She drove the end of the steel pipe she still carried hard into his knee. The joint buckled with a sickening crunch. Silas screamed, a cry of pure agony, and fell to the rooftop. His pistol skittered away into the darkness. Kate was on him in an instant, the meat cleaver now in her hand. She pressed the cold, flat side of the blade against his throat. "It's over, Thorn," she whispered, her breath misting in the cold air. The rooftop was silent, except for Silas's pained gasps and the soft patter of the rain. From below, the first faint sound of distant sirens began to cut through the night. The gambit hadn't been in the kitchen after all. It had been here, in the dark on the roof, a desperate play of light and shadow, and it had worked. The wail of sirens grew from a distant cry to an impending scream, converging on their location from all sides. The rooftop standoff was over, but the story was not. The building was about to be swarmed by the NYPD. "We have to go," Vance said, his voice shaky but urgent. "The police will be here any second." Kate didn't take her eyes or the cleaver off Silas Thorne, who was writhing on the wet gravel, clutching his shattered knee. "He still has a man downstairs," she said. "And Frank Miller is out there somewhere. We go down the fire escape. We're walking into an unknown situation." She kept Silas pinned with one hand, using the other to quickly search him, pulling a set of zip-tie restraints from one of his tactical pouches. With brutal efficiency, she bound his hands behind his back. "Don't move," she ordered before turning to Vance. "Let's go." They found the fire escape on the far side of the building, a rusty skeletal structure clinging to the brickwork. It overlooked the same dark alley where Kate had first seen one of the spotters. As they descended, the sounds of the city grew louder, a chaotic mix of sirens, shouting, and car horns. The alley below was dark, filled with overflowing dumpsters, and the stench of refuse. They reached the final ladder, dropping the last 10 feet into the narrow, enclosed space. It felt like landing in another world, a forgotten pocket of the city, far from the opulence of the gilded cage. And it was there that they found they were not alone. Leaning against the opposite wall, shrouded in shadow, was the fifth man, the one who had locked them in the kitchen. He had his gun raised, pointed directly at them. He wasn't Silas's man. He was Frank Miller. Vance froze. "Frank," he breathed, a look of profound hurt on his face. "Why?" Frank Miller stepped forward, his heavy features illuminated by a dim security light. There was no remorse in his eyes, only a weary bitterness. "Why? You ask me why, Arthur? For 12 years I've taken a bullet for you, figuratively speaking. I've managed your threats, swept your messes under the rug, stood by while you bought and sold the lives of men, like Walter Thorne. And for what? To be passed over, to be treated like the hired help. Thorne's son, he offered me respect, and a percentage that made your pension plan look like a joke. I trusted you, Frank, Vance said, his voice cracking. That was your mistake, Miller grunted. You trust money, not people. He gestured with his pistol. It's over. Silas might have failed, but I won't. Kate slowly moved in front of Vance, shielding him with her body. She had dropped the pipe on the roof, and the cleaver felt hopelessly outmatched by a firearm. At this range, she was analyzing angles, distances, looking for any advantage. The alley was a perfect kill zone, narrow with no cover and no escape. You won't get away, Kate said, her voice a low, steady challenge. The police are all at the front, Miller sneered. By the time they figure out we're back here, we'll be long gone. Now step aside, lady. This doesn't concern you. I'm afraid it does, she replied. It was then that Arthur Vance did something that surprised them all. He stepped out from behind Kate. He faced his treacherous security chief, his fear replaced by a cold, quiet fury he usually reserved for the boardroom. So, this is it, Frank? This is what your 12 years of service amounts to? Betrayal and murder in a filthy alley? Vance began to slowly walk forward. Stay back, Arthur, Miller warned, his aim wavering slightly. He hadn't expected this defiance. You're talking about respect, Vance continued, his voice resonating with power. You think this is respect? Siding with the desperate son of a failed man? Walter Thorne was a fool who couldn't see the future. He clung to the past, and it drowned him. His son is no different. He's driven by emotion. And you, Frank, you threw everything away for them? Vance was just feet from him now. It was a colossal gamble, a high-stakes negotiation where the currency was his own life. He was using the only weapons he had left, words and an indomitable will. Kate saw her chance. Miller's attention was completely fixed on Vance. He was mesmerized by this final, unexpected confrontation with the man he had once protected and now despised. His focus had narrowed, his peripheral vision gone. As Vance spoke his last words, Kate moved. She lunged to the side, grabbing the lid of a metal dumpster. It was heavy, unwieldy, but she used her momentum, swinging it like a shield. Miller, startled by the sudden movement, fired. The shot went wild, ricocheting off the brick wall with a screech. Before he could fire again, Kate was on him. She brought the heavy dumpster lid down on his arm, crashing it against the wall. The sound of snapping bone was sickeningly loud. Miller screamed, his gun falling from his shattered hand. Kate didn't stop. She drove her shoulder into his chest, slamming him against the wall. He slumped to the ground, moaning in agony, his betrayal ending not in a blaze of glory, but in a pathetic, painful heap. The alley fell silent. Vance stood panting, the adrenaline leaving him weak. Kate stood over Miller, the chef's knife she'd retrieved still in her hand. The back door of the restaurant burst open, and two uniformed NYPD officers, guns drawn, spilled into the alley. NYPD, drop your weapons. Hands in the air. Kate let the knife and the cleaver clatter to the ground. She raised her hands. Arthur Vance, looking from the collapsed form of Frank Miller to the resolute figure of the waitress who had saved him, slowly raised his as well. The reckoning was over. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, crackling radios, and the methodical chaos of a major crime scene. The alley and the restaurant were cordoned off, swarming with police officers, detectives, and paramedics. Vance was immediately surrounded, wrapped in a blanket, and questioned by a stern-faced detective named Corrigan. He recounted the events, his voice still hoarse, but the narrative was clear. His waitress, a woman named Catherine Novak, had saved his life. Kate sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a paramedic tending to a deep gash on her forearm where a shard of glass had cut her. She answered the detective's questions with quiet, clipped precision, giving them just enough detail about the attackers but leaving out the parts of her history that were buried too deep to share. She was just a waitress, she insisted, who got lucky. But Corrigan, a veteran of the force, looked at her with knowing eyes. He'd seen civilians in crisis. They didn't move like she moved. They didn't fight like she fought. But he didn't press. Silas Thorne and his crew, including the disgraced Frank Miller, were taken into custody. The story was already taking shape for the media. A foiled, high-stakes kidnapping of a prominent billionaire, an inside job. It would be the lead story on every news channel by morning. After giving his statement, Vance walked over to Kate. The paramedics had finished bandaging her arm. He stood before her, stripped of his usual arrogance. His expensive suit now little more than a collection of rags. The invincible titan of industry looked tired, vulnerable, and profoundly human. "They told me your name is Catherine," he began, his voice soft. "I don't know what to say. Thank you feels insufficient." Kate simply nodded, staring at the flashing lights reflecting in a puddle on the ground. "I want to offer you a job," Vance said, getting straight to the point, falling back on the one language he truly understood: transactions. "Head of my personal security. Name your price. Double what I paid Frank. Triple. It doesn't matter. I need you." Kate finally looked up at him. For a moment she considered it. The money would be life-changing. The position would offer a challenge. But she could already feel the phantom weight of the tactical gear, taste the bitter ash of that life. She saw the ghosts of Beirut waiting for her in the back of an armored car. "No," she said, the word simple and final. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Vance. But that's not my life anymore. I chose to leave it behind." Vance looked taken aback. Then, a look of understanding dawned on his face. He had tried to buy her, just as he bought everything else. And for the second time that night, she had surprised him. "I understand," he said after a long pause. "But my offer stands in any capacity. Anything you need, anything at all, it's yours." He pulled out a sleek, black business card. It was made of metal. "This is my private number. No assistants, no secretaries. It rings directly to me." Kate took the card. Its weight was substantial in her hand. "There is one thing," she said. "Anything." "The kitchen staff," she said, her gaze drifting toward the restaurant. "They were terrified. They make barely enough to live on in this city. I'm sure the restaurant will be closed for weeks for repairs. See to it that they're taken care of. Full pay plus a bonus for the trauma." Vance stared at her. Of all the things she could have asked for: a fortune, a new life, a favor of immense power, she had asked for security for a dozen people whose names she probably didn't even know. It was a gesture of such profound, unexpected decency that it left him speechless. He finally found his voice. "Consider it done. They'll be treated as heroes." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps not head of security, but a consultant perhaps on your terms to help me restructure my organization, to identify other vulnerabilities, other Franks." Kate considered this. It wasn't the front lines. It was strategy, analysis. It was using her skills without having to carry a gun. It was a way to integrate her past into her present, not as a ghost to be feared, but as a tool to be used. "I'll think about it, Mr. Vance," she said, a small, genuine smile finally touching her lips. In the weeks that followed, the story of the billionaire and the waitress became a minor legend in the city. The media portrayed Kate as an ordinary woman who rose to an extraordinary occasion. Arthur Vance, to the shock of the financial world, quietly settled the Ethel Red Industries acquisition on terms far more generous to the employees than anyone expected. He even set up a foundation in Walter Thorne's name for ethical business practices. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. Kate Novak did not return to the Gilded Cage. She took Vance's consulting job, working remotely on her own schedule. She used the money to buy a small, quiet apartment far from the noise of the city. Sometimes she would sit by her window, holding Vance's metal card, a tangible reminder of the night the ghosts of two very different lives collided. She hadn't sought out the violence, but by facing it, she had finally silenced the echoes of her past. She was no longer just a waitress, hiding from who she was. She was Catherine Novak, and she was finally peacefully in control. That single night in the Gilded Cage changed everything, not just for the billionaire whose life was saved, but for the woman who refused to be a victim of her own past. It's a powerful reminder that heroes aren't always the ones in the spotlight. Sometimes they are the people we overlook, everyday individuals with hidden strengths and untold stories forged in fires. We can only begin to fathom the depths of it all. Kate's transformative journey serves as a potent reminder that the tapestry of your past need not confine you within its threads. Rather, it can be the very arsenal from which you draw the strength and resources to construct a brighter, more fulfilling future for yourself. What dormant skills, what as yet untapped reserves of inner strength do you harbor within the depths of your being? Consider them, nurture them. If this chronicle of unanticipated bravery and suspenseful, dramatic turns has resonated with you, has held your attention and moved you, we implore you to express your appreciation by tapping that like button. Share this compelling narrative with someone you believe would find solace and inspiration in a tale where the perceived underdog ultimately triumphs against all odds, rising to achieve remarkable success. And, perhaps most importantly of all, consider subscribing to our channel to ensure you gain access to a wealth of further real-life dramas and utterly incredible stories that we believe you simply won't want to miss. Don't forget to click that notification bell so you are certain to never miss even a single one of our frequent updates. We extend our deepest gratitude to you for lending us your ear and your attention. Thank you, from the bottom of our hearts, for listening.